All right, so we've got another topic to go on to.
Yeah, it's the Obama cancer plan. Now, President Obama was the first president to develop a comprehensive cancer plan. However, the plan reflects overwhelming emphasis on oncology, that is, treatment of cancer. That's a diagnosis and treatment of cancer, without any reference whatsoever to prevention. However, the more cancer you prevent, the less there is to treat. Now, Obama's plan prioritizes and coordinates several agencies: the National Cancer Institute for Research and Clinical Trials, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, and the FDA for regulating cancer drugs. Now, in 1971, Congress passed the National Cancer Act, which authorized a national cancer program calling for expanded and intensified research on cancer prevention due to occupational or environmental exposure to carcinogens. And shortly after that, President Nixon announced his war on cancer, and he authorized a $200 million budget for the National Cancer Institute. Since then, the budget of the National Cancer Institute has increased by over 30-fold to over $6 billion this year. Meanwhile, the incidence of a wide range of cancers other than due to smoking has also escalated sharply. In other words, the more money we spend, the more cancer we're getting. The incidence of a very wide range of cancers has moved up sharply over the last 3 decades. These include malignant melanoma, 170%, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, 80%, thyroid, 120%, testis, 60%, childhood cancers, 40%. So, isn't this odd? The more money we spend, the more money the National Cancer Institute gets, more cancer rates we get. And this is because of the fact that the National Cancer Institute has no interest whatsoever in prevention. Its focus is entirely and exclusively focused on diagnosis, treatment, and oncology research. So the NCI, National Cancer Institute, has failed to develop or publicize any listing or registry of avoidable exposures to carcinogens, and these include some drugs, some pharmaceuticals, diagnostic radiation, occupational, environmental exposures to carcinogens, ingredients in consumer products, carcinogenic ingredients in consumer products, food, household products, cosmetics, and personal care products. Furthermore, the NCI, National Cancer Institute, has failed to respond, except misleadingly, to a series of congressional requests for such information. In fact, in March '88, in a series of questions to NCI Director Richard Klausner, and I was involved in these exchanges with working with Congressman David Obey, we requested information on NCI's policies and priorities, and Congressman Obey said, should the NCI develop a register of avoidable carcinogens and to make this information widely available to the public? And the answer was and remains no. And NCI still persists in indifference to cancer prevention, coupled with overwhelming emphasis on damage control, namely screening, diagnosis, treatment, clinical trials. And these innovative treatments on which this massive NCI budget are allocated to have been sharply criticized by leading experts in the field. For instance, Nobelist Leland Hartwell, president of the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Control Center, he warned, this was in 2004, about 6 years ago, and the budget then was about $5 billion. Congress and the public are not paying the National Cancer Institute $5 billion a year, most of which is spent on promoting ineffective drugs for terminal disease. And I should emphasize that the cost of these new biotech drugs have increased more than 100-fold over the last decade. I repeat, more than 100-fold over the last decade. Furthermore, the U.S. spends more than 5 times more than Great Britain does on chemotherapy, yet survival rates are similar. So, how do we explain the complete indifference of the Obama campaign to prevention? We have such overwhelming documentation on a wide range of the causes of a wide range of cancers. Let me just give you a few just as examples. Malignant melanoma of the skin over the last few decades has gone up by 170%. 170%, nearly, it's doubled. And these are due to the use of sunscreens in childhood, which fail to block long-wave ultraviolet light. Thyroid cancer has gone up by over 100% due to radiation of one kind or another. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma has gone up by 80% due to herbicides and hair dyes. Testicular cancer has gone up by nearly 50% due to pesticides, hormone residues in meat. Childhood leukemia has increased by 60%. Childhood leukemias increased by 60% due to ionizing radiation, preservatives in meat, hot dogs, parental exposures to carcinogens. Ovarian cancer has increased in women over the age of 65 by about 50% in African American women due to the genital use of talc powder. Breast cancer has gone up 20%, etc., etc., etc. So isn't this like Alice in Wonderland? We have vast body of information, unavoidable causes of cancer, yet the total emphasis of Obama, our president, and the National Cancer Institute is exclusively focused on diagnosis and treatment with total indifference to prevention. Now, in fact, the National Cancer Institute and also the American Cancer Society still claim that over 95% of all cancers are due to unhealthy behavior. In other words, it's your own fault if you get cancer. And obviously, when it comes to smoking, there's no argument on that. Clearly, that's that is unhealthy behavior. But poor nutrition, inactivity, obesity, and all of these, but the overwhelming majority of cancers are due to unhealthy behavior. If you get cancer, it's your own fault. Now, in the meantime, while maintaining that it's your own fault, while not denying that cancer rates are escalating and saying if you get cancer, it's your own fault, the NCI is still claiming great successes in new cancer treatment, promises which haven't borne out. And in fact, the public are now paying, let me just quote from Nobel laureate Leland Hartwell, who's president of the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center, and in spite of being an oncologist, he was wise enough and concerned enough to warn in 2004 that the public are paying NCI, National Cancer Institute, $5 billion a year, most of which is spent on promoting ineffective drugs for terminal disease. And we in this country spend 50 times more on chemotherapy than Great Britain does, and yet we have no greater success rate. So we're really dealing with overwhelming policy ineptitude, which verges on the criminal on the part of directors of the National Cancer Institute and other federal agencies ranging from the FDA to USDA, who I mentioned previously. So these are areas in which those of you who are interested in, you'll find laid out in detail in a series of press releases on the Cancer Prevention Coalition website, www.preventcancer.com. Now, things have got even worse still over recent development. The White House very, very recently has nominated Nobel laureate Harold Varmus to be director of the National Cancer Institute. Now, Varmus was a key advisor to Obama in his 2008 presidential campaign, and he was subsequently appointed as co-chairman of the President's Council of Advisors in Science. Now, Varmus has a distinguished track record in basic research on cancer treatment, but with total ignorance and indifference to cancer prevention. In fact, a couple of decades ago, he said something like, there's no way you can do experiments to see what causes cancer, and anyway, it's not the kind of thing scientists can afford to do.